Hi folks, HR Funk here with something a little bit different today. What I have with me here is a CZ P09 Nocturne 9mm polymer frame semi-automatic pistol. And some of you might be saying right now, well, gee, HR Funk, what's so different about that? It's another polymer frame 9mm semi-automatic pistol, which is true, but in a world that is infatuated with 9mm polymer frame striker fired pistols that operate on what's generically called a double action only trigger system, the P09 Nocturne is a polymer frame hammer fired pistol that operates on the traditional trigger system, which features a double action pull for the first shot and single action trigger pull for every successive shot after that, unless or until the trigger is decocked. And I've been intrigued with these handguns for a while. The P09C and the larger P09F Nocturne pistols have been out for 4 or 5 months now, and I have been thinking about getting one for a while, and I finally did. And the reason that I've been interested in them is trifold. First off, the design of this handgun in terms of its basic operating system trace its roots all the way back to the CZ75 pistol that I have always had a very high opinion of. Also, the P09 Nocturne, using that double action first and single action successive trigger system, traces its roots all the way back to the Walther Firearms Company. In the early days of the 20th century, this trigger design essentially is 100 years old, or a little bit more than that. And anything that's been in use for a century and is still being used probably has some merit to it. I actually used firearms that had this type of a trigger system as duty pistols back during the early 1990s. And this is, as I said, sort of the ultimate evolution of that trigger system, or at least the ultimate evolution to this point. And lastly, a lot of people whose opinions I think very highly of hold the P09 Nocturne and also its predecessor, the P07 pistols, in very high regard. So I've been wanting to try one of these out for a while, and in this video I'm going to give you a close-up look at the P09 Nocturne here in the shop. Then we're going to head off to the range and see how it performs. So here we go. And we'll kick off this review of the CZ P09C Nocturne. And by the way, I kept forgetting to put the C in there when I was doing the intro, but this is the P09C, the compact version of the P09. The full-size version is the P09F Nocturne. In any case, we'll start things off with the way you bring the handgun home with you, which is in the box. And in this case, the box is a plastic hard case that you see here. It has latches on the front, it has a carry handle, and there's even a place right there to install a lock if you want to secure the case closed. When we open the case, we find, not surprisingly, the P09C Nocturne pistol itself. The pistol comes with 2 15-round magazines. I'll talk more about those later. There are also interchangeable back straps. There is one that comes installed on the pistol and 2 different size back straps inside the case, so you can swap those out in order to customize the grip to the shooter's hand. There is some cleaning gear. This bag contains a Torx wrench, a small hex wrench, and you can see right there, there's a snap cap that comes along with this, and these little green inserts are interchangeable for the snap cap, so it can be used for a longer time than when you just wear out one of the inserts. There are parts if you want to swap out the decocker on the P09C with a manual safety and allow the pistol to be carried cocked and locked, so those come along as well. There is a bicycle lock because CZ is another one of the companies that is concerned that we might get our bicycles stolen. And lastly, there is a manual and paperwork, and I want to talk about this manual for just a moment because I don't like it. As you can see, it comes in multiple different languages, but in all those languages, it just doesn't convey a lot of information. There is very basic instruction for loading and unloading and cleaning and things like that, but there are so many things that are not included in here, and I maybe should be just glad that there was a manual at all, because a lot of companies aren't even including a manual anymore. You just have to go online and there are various instructions and videos and things like that. But I'm one of these people who likes a detailed manual with good pictures, so I can sit down in my chair in my office and read through the manual and figure out how to do everything I need to do with my new handgun. And that's me. I can't imagine someone who was new to firearms having this as their only instruction, and then having all the things that can be done with a handgun like the P09C Nocturne, and having to try to figure that out themselves or look at YouTube videos that may or may not be accurate or what have you. Now, one good thing with my purchase of the P09C Nocturne is the fact that it's going to be around for a long, long time. And I already have a lot of concept videos in mind for things that I would like to do with this pistol. So maybe some of those videos on YouTube will be mine, and I will do my best to make them accurate videos to show how to do some of the various different things with this pistol. In any case, let me move everything else off to the side, and we'll talk about the P09C Nocturne itself. Here's our first up-close look at the CZ P09C Nocturne, and I'm going to quit saying that over and over and over. From now on, I'm just going to call it the P09 or the P09C. In any case, as I said during the opening, this is a polymer frame semi-automatic 9mm hammer-fired pistol, and you can see the hammer right there. And also, as I said, it operates on a double-action first pull, single-action successive pull trigger system, and you can see how far forward the trigger is in the trigger guard right there as evidence that it is currently in double-action mode. Here is a starboard side look at the P09C, and as I said, this is a compact version of this pistol, meant to be a more carryable size. It's roughly the size of a Glock 19. In terms of its dimensions, it has an overall length of 7.3 inches with a barrel length of 3.7 inches. That's slightly shorter than a Glock 19. The height is 5.4 inches. The width is 1.5 inches at its thickest point, and also the weight is listed at 26 ounces. I'll be checking that on my scale here shortly. We'll start our top-down look at the P09C with the sights, and as you can see, the rear sight has a serrated face to cut down on glare. The sights also operate on a 3-dot system. The dots themselves are luminescent. They are not night sights, but rather they gather light, and for a period of time after the pistol is introduced to a dark environment, those sights will glow, but they will not glow forever and ever and ever like true night sights. So keep that in mind. This is a good sight system. I have used it before in low light conditions. I don't think I've ever had a problem where I couldn't see them, but if you're in a dark environment for a long, long time, as I said, these are not going to continue to shine like true night sights will. And by the way, there is a look at your sight picture with this 3-dot system. The front surface of the rear sight is squared off, so it can be used as a tactical shelf if necessary for one-handed loading and cycling of the slide. In addition to the mechanical sights, the P09C is also optic ready. You can see the cover right there over top of the optic mounting platform, and the slide is cut to accept optics of the RMSC footprint, so keep that in mind. It will not take the larger RMR type sights or something like a Delta Point Pro or whatever, but the smaller carry type optics should bolt right up to it with no problem whatsoever. Moving on to the slide itself, you can see it has both forward and aft serrations. These serrations are fairly deep, they are wide and relatively sharp, so it's easy to get a good grasp on the slide in order to cycle it. And I know some people are concerned with the CZ pistols since they have the reverse rails and the slide is lower in the frame than with other handguns, that there's not as much there to grab a hold of, but I think those serrations are aggressive to the point that just about anybody is going to be able to grasp that slide and cycle it when they need to. Moving on to the frame, you can see that there is a single slot equipment rail here at the front. Coming back to the trigger guard, the front is squared off, and also there's a little bit of texturing there, so if someone likes the finger forward hold, there's a little bit of added traction on the trigger guard for that. The trigger guard itself is undercut at the rear to help the shooter get a higher grip on the pistol. There is also a textured surface right here on the side of the frame for a thumbs forward hold, and there's a place in the same location on the other side of the frame for the index point of a trigger finger when your trigger finger is not on the trigger. The texturing around the circumference of the P09C's grip is what I would call a medium texturing. It is not extremely coarse, but I think it's coarse enough to be able to get a good grasp on the pistol. It also goes very high up to this portion of the grip where your thumb would be on either side of the pistol. So that's good. That's lacking in a lot of pistols. The interchangeable back strap has a pin right here, and in order to change it, that pin needs to be driven out. The back strap will then slide off the frame and a new back strap can be installed. But I've already swapped this out. I now have the large back strap on here. The pistol came with the smallest back strap installed, and it was a little bit of a job to be able to replace that thing, partly due to the fact that the lanyard loop right here is also the cap for the hammer spring, and I had the hammer fully forward to take as much tension off of that spring as I could, but still it took quite a bit of force. I had to press this down on my bench in order to get that back up into its proper position, and then I used a punch in order to hold the lanyard loop and the associated cap for the hammer spring in place while I tried to drive the pin in from the other side. And I'm not sure if there was a little bit of material in here that got in the way, but it took a lot of work to drive that pin back into the proper location. That was not an easy job, and I'm glad that that large insert feels good to me because I didn't want to have to take that back out and try to install the medium one. At the rear of the grip frame, there is a grip tang that you can see right here. And this is something that a lot of manufacturers are starting to delete from their handgun designs, and I think that's a mistake. Not only does this help to keep the shooter's hands safe from hammer bite or slide bite, but also it aids in the controllability of the pistol because it resists muzzle lift. As you can see, with the tang positioned between my thumb and forefinger here, as the slide cycles and the pistol attempts to rise, that works against that and helps to keep the muzzle down. That's something that was deleted from the Smith & Wesson M&P pistols, and I have an M&P 2.0 here. You can see it doesn't have that, and even as I'm holding it in my hand, I can tell there's just not that controllability for the handgun. If the muzzle is going to rise, there's nothing there to resist it. So this is something that, as I said, manufacturers are starting to do away with. I think that's a mistake, and I think they should continue to add that particular feature to their grip design. Turning our attention to the controls of the P09C, I'll start off with the slide stop, and surprisingly, this is a non-ambidextrous unit. You can see it is only located on the left side of the frame, so this is set up for a right-handed shooter. I'm not sure why CZ did not make that an ambi unit, although the slide stop pin that you see right here needs to be removed in order for the pistol to be disassembled, and that's probably the biggest reason they didn't do that. However, the decocker is ambidextrous. You can see a lever on either side, and when the pistol is in the fully cocked mode, in order to decock it, all that needs to be done is for the front of that decocker to be rotated down. That will lower the hammer into the half-cock notch, and this is where the double-action trigger pull begins from. It is not with the hammer all the way forward against the firing pin. It is in that half-cock position. The magazine release for the P09C has vertical serrations that you see right there. That works very well to give your thumb some traction in order to release that magazine. And in terms of ambidexterity, this is also a reversible magazine catch. You can see you can swap it out and move it to the other side for a left-handed shooter. One of the quirks of this pistol design, and this is entirely due to the fact that it traces its trigger lineage all the way back to the CZ75, is the fact that constantly dry firing this trigger system will damage this pin right here. This is the firing pin, retaining pin, and constantly cycling the trigger with no round of ammunition in the chamber will eventually cause this to fail, and it will need to be replaced. In order to counteract that, CZ included the snap cap with the pistol when it came from the factory. This is something that I think really needs to be in the owner's manual, and it is not in there. When we install the snap cap, now we can safely dry fire the pistol, and it is not going to damage that pin. The action of the trigger in the P09C is somewhat different than other double action, single action trigger system handguns that I've used in the past. The movement of the trigger is very short, and even the hammer movement is very short. On the website, it indicates that the double action pull movement is 0.5 inches for the trigger, and that's probably about right. Interestingly, the single action movement is only 0.4 of an inch. So although the single action pull is much lighter, it's not much shorter. The result of that double action pull being that short is it seems like you put a lot of pressure on the trigger and then all of a sudden it goes. And the reason it feels like that is because that's exactly what it does. So the timing for the trigger pull when you're shooting this particular pistol is a little different, and it has a little different feel to it. If I compare it to my P01, the trigger mechanism is very, very similar in the P01. It also traces its lineage back to the CZ75, but when I squeeze this trigger, it moves a lot farther before it falls, both the trigger and hammer, and because of that, it feels much smoother. I'll do that again. Notice the movement. It feels a little bit lighter, but much smoother because there is that additional movement. I suspect that the double action trigger on the P09 can be fired more quickly since it doesn't move as far. I'm going to have to see what happens when I get out to the range though and see whether I think that is in any way influencing my shooting or if it's nothing to worry about. I'm a little concerned about that, and I've been doing quite a bit of dry fire practice with the P09C in order to get ready for taking it out to the range and starting to shoot it there. So the double action pull is not tremendously long as double action triggers go, but it is relatively heavy. After the pistol cycles, the trigger reset for single action mode is a little more than we typically see with a lot of pistols these days, but it's not excessive, I don't believe. There is a little bit of creep in the single action trigger, and you can see it right there, a little bit of movement before the trigger breaks, and then a nice light single action pull. I'm not sure exactly where this trigger is breaking. I am going to get out my Lyman trigger pull gauge in just a moment and see if we can figure that out. So let's see if we can get a double action trigger pull weight for the P09C. Actually we did. 10 pounds, 15.8 ounces, so almost 11 pounds. Let's try that again. £10, 12.7 ounces, so at least it's staying consistent. See if we can get one more for a 3-pull average. Just over 10.5 pounds that time for an average of 10 pounds, 12.4 ounces. So it's coming in about 10 3/4 pounds or just shy of 11 pounds for the double action pull. Let's find out what the single action pull looks like. 4 pounds, 7 ounces. 4 pounds, 5.7 ounces. 4 pounds, 7.1 ounces for an average of 4.66 pounds or 4 pounds, 6.6 ounces for the average single action pull. That's not bad at all. And as I said before, this trigger pull may well smooth out and get a little bit lighter after it gets some rounds on it. As I said earlier in the video, the P09C does come with two 15-round magazines. These are metal magazines. They are CZ branded, so I don't know if CZ makes them themselves or if another manufacturer actually creates them for CZ. In any case, the only company that's noted on the magazine is CZ itself. These have a polymer base plate that you can see right there that also have texturing on either side. So if the magazine is for some reason stuck in the magazine well, you have something a little bit more there to grab a hold of in order to forcibly remove the magazine. One nice thing about the P09C Nocturne, especially if you have older 75 pattern handguns, is it will use the CZ75 magazines. And I can use the snap cap here to demonstrate the fact that it will load ammunition from the magazine, and when the last round is fired, it will lock the slide open. I'll be testing one or two of the 75 pattern magazines. This is actually a magazine from my P01 that I have with me here. But I'll test one or two of those at the range, but I have no doubt whatsoever that they're going to function just fine in the P09C. Before anyone asks, no, the P09C magazines will not work in the P01, CZ75, or any of the other older CZs. So the magazine cross compatibility only goes one way. It goes from the older pistols to the newer pistol, not the newer pistol to the older pistols. The unloaded weight of the P09C is 24.7 ounces. With an unloaded magazine, it is 27.7 ounces, almost 28 ounces. Adding a fully loaded magazine with 15 rounds of 115 grain 9mm ammunition, it's 34.2 ounces. And when we add a round for the chamber, as you would be carrying the pistol, it is 34.7 ounces. The CZ P09C Nocturne has a 5-year manufacturer's warranty against defects in materials and workmanship, and also CZ is now offering a lifetime warranty on their barrels. Now, I don't know how much ammunition it would take to wear out one of these barrels. I think it would be a lot. I've worn out rifle barrels. I've never worn out a handgun barrel, but if anyone ever manages to wear one out, CZ will replace that barrel. The MSRP for this pistol is $649 for this version. There's also another version that's being offered now with a threaded barrel. That one costs a little bit more. I believe it is $699 if I remember correctly. So take a look at the CZ website for all the information on pricing and different versions of the P09 Nocturne that might be available. And that's going to do it for the up-close review of the P09C Nocturne here in the shop. Now let's head off to the range and see how it shoots. And I'm now out at the range with the CZ P09C Nocturne, and prior to coming out I did mount the Hilux TD3E optic to this pistol, and when I got here I proceeded to zero it at a distance of 25 yards. At this juncture I think I have a pretty good zero on the optic. For zeroing, I was using 115 grain Hot Munitions poly-coated ammunition, and in just a couple of minutes I'm going to start to do some accuracy testing. I'm going to start out with that ammunition, and I'm using the same exact target that I was using for zeroing, so when you see the target you're going to see a couple of green stickers on there. The last 3 shots that I fired went into a group that's pretty much right on at 25 yards, and the group was about 3 inches, but I want to get it on camera and see what I can get for a 5-shot group with that ammunition. Then I'm going to test a couple of other types of ammunition and see what kind of accuracy we get with them. So let's get to it. So here we go. One thing I want to mention before I start shooting is, as I said, I just zeroed this optic. So there's every possibility that I might have to fine-tune it a little bit as I go with these accuracy tests. For that reason, as usual, I'm going to be looking more at the group sizes that I'm getting with the P09C rather than the group locations, because I might have to dial that in a little bit one way or the other just to get it right where it needs to be. But let's see how it goes. Nice to be able to work with that single action trigger. Let's go down range and see what the accuracy looks like. 4 out of those 5 shots went into just over an inch at 25 yards. About an inch and 1/8 it looks like. Then I blew it with this shot and opened up the entire group to more like 2.5 inches, which still from 25 yards is not too bad. This one, I'm almost certain, is my fault. The rest of these are more a reflection of the accuracy of the pistol, so that's looking very good. Might need to bring it down just a little bit. I'll see what the next group looks like. Next up is Winchester 124 grain NATO ball. And just for fun, this time around, I'm testing the ammunition out of one of my P01 magazines. So we're going to test the functioning of the CZ75 pattern magazines along with the accuracy this time around. Let's see how it goes. Let's head downrange and have a look. The P09C did not seem to like that 124 grain Winchester NATO load nearly as much as it liked the Hot Munitions 115 grain polycoat. Those shots all went into about 5.5 inches center to center from the two farthest shot holes. I'm wondering if this was me. I've got 3 pretty good shots here and then 2 of them that are high and to the right going this way. I'm going to try this one more time and try to determine whether this is the ammunition the pistol just really doesn't like or if I just shot a really bad group that time around. Let's find out. So 5 more rounds of the Winchester NATO load. And I'm going to try to hold right on that white sticker that is dead center in that circle. And we'll see if I can close this group up a little bit. All right, let's head back down range and see if I did any better. Based on this, I think we can safely say those shots that were way over here before were my fault. The group is still not as good as we saw with the Hot Munitions ammo, but it's much better than it was before. It's about 2.5 inches center to center, hitting a little bit high. Not surprisingly, that's pretty hot stuff with that NATO rating for that ammunition. I might bring the sight down just a click or two because I was also just a little bit high with the Hot Munition stuff as well, and just see if we can center this up a little bit better for the next test. Final test is going to be with SIG 124 grain V-Crown ammunition. So along with looking at accuracy, I'm also testing the functioning of the P09C with hollow point ammunition. And I've always found this SIG V-Crown ammo to be pretty good. Let's see how it does. There's 5 shots, perfect functioning with the hollow points. Let's see where they landed. So I did make an adjustment to the TD3E before I fired this group. I brought it down some, and obviously I brought it a little bit too much, at least for that ammunition. This might have been just about right with that NATO Winchester load. The group is about 2.25 inches center to center. So all in all, with these different types of ammunition that I've been testing, the CZ P09C Nocturne is running right around 2 inches, give or take 2 to 2.5 inches from that distance of 25 yards, which is not too bad at all. Now let's move on to some defensive drills and see how it does in those. On we go to defensive drills with the P09C, beginning with controlled pairs from a distance of 5 yards. I am starting all of these drills with the pistol in double action mode, so the first shot that I fire is going to be double action, and each shot after that will be single action. So let's see what happens here. And I am pulling those double action shots a little low and to the left, and that's something I'm just going to have to work on with this pistol. Let's move on to failure drills from a distance of 7 yards and see if I do a little bit better. Failure drills from 7 yards, and what I'm going to have to do is just concentrate on that first trigger pull. As I said back in the shop, this is a short, heavy double action trigger pull. It's not quite like the triggers on the handguns that I used back in the day on my duty pistols, or as my duty pistols. So let's see if I can make this look a little better this time around. And that time I blew the headshot. That was a little better. That's looking better. Each one got a little better than the one before. 5 shots to the body from a distance of 15 yards. Once again, I'll be starting with a double action pull for the first shot. That didn't feel too bad. Let's see what the group looks like. 5 shots to the body from a distance of 25 yards. Again, starting with the first shot, double action pull. Let's see what happens from back here. Time to head back down range. Whenever you're firing unsupported from 25 yards and you end up with 3 shots on the heart, you can't be too upset. I've got shot number 4 just off the heart here, and then one of them I let get away from me a little bit. It went high into the right here, but all in all, not bad performance at all. The functioning has been perfect with the P09C with all the different types of ammunition. It ran perfectly with both of its own magazines. This is actually, again, the P01 magazine, so I didn't even realize I'd put that in there. But the functioning has been perfect. The recoil impulse is kind of different. It's a very soft shooting pistol, and I think it has the capability of being run very, very quickly once somebody gets acclimated to this trigger. I'm going to take a run at the swinging plates from a distance of 8 yards and see just how quickly I might be able to put a bullet on each of those. Swinging plates from a distance of about 25 feet. Let's see what happens here. All but one. That third plate didn't even budge. That time it did. Moment of truth, folks, is the P01C Nocturne a tack driver. I have 3 rounds loaded into the magazine. I've got a tack in the target. I'm set up at a distance of 7 yards. Let's find out. Little high on the first shot, and I did start out again with the pistol in double action mode for that very first shot. Wow, went almost the same place as the last shot. So I have one more shot to see if the P09C Nocturne is a tack driver. Here we go. Yes, on the third shot. It is a tack driver. I finally figured out the hold on that one. Final thoughts on the CZ P09C Nocturne. The first thing I'll say is I have had the hardest time during this video saying CZ P09C Nocturne. I think at various times during the video I might have called this the P01, I might have called it the SP01, I might have called it a CZ75, I don't know what I might have called it, but for some reason I was just having a hard time getting my brain and my mouth coordinated to say CZ P09C Nocturne. So there, I did it 2 or 3 times in a row. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Beyond that, there were a lot of great things that we can talk about with this pistol. First off, the accuracy I thought was pretty outstanding. For a pistol with a 3.70 something inch barrel, so less than 4 inches, about 3 3/4 inch barrel, and it was shooting 2-inch groups from a distance of 25 yards. That's pretty darn good. The reliability was outstanding. It functioned with hollow points, it functioned with full metal jackets. It had no issues going from the magazines that came with it to the standard CZ75 pattern magazines, so no issues whatsoever there. There were no malfunctions with any of the subsystems. It decocked every time it was supposed to decock. It locked open every time it fired the last round, so no issues whatsoever with all of that. In terms of its ergonomics, it feels good. The recoil impulse feels very light, as I mentioned a little while ago, so there's nothing about the shooting experience that's unpleasant. The biggest thing that I think about when I'm working with this pistol is that I'm going to have to master that trigger. And this is different because, as I said, I've shot double action, single action pistols in the past, and the trigger system was different. It was a longer pull, it was a smoother pull. This very short, fairly heavy double action pull that this pistol has probably reminds me most of my Walther PPK. That has that same sort of stacking, if you will, where you put a lot of pressure on it and then all of a sudden it goes. That's the same exact thing that this trigger does, or this hammer does, when you're firing it in double action mode. And some of you might be thinking, well, why are you even doing that? Why don't you just go back to the standard double action only or pre-cock strikers or whatever? The reason is because I think this system has some merit. And I was going to go into this in this video, but I think I'm going to wait and probably produce a future video where I'm talking about why this particular trigger action still makes a lot of sense, especially if you're training people with varying degrees of firearms experience and knowledge. Like I said, that'll be a topic of a future video. But all in all, I think for my very first time shooting this pistol and with still getting acclimated to it, things went pretty well. If you look at all of the stickers from all of the defensive drills on the target that I was using, you can see that there's really not a bad shot in there. There are some that are better than others, but nothing that's way off. There were no actual misses or anything like that. The pistol was a tack driver. I didn't have a great deal of problems running the swinging plates, although I did have that one actual miss, which bugs me. But in any case, all in all, I think for a first outing with this handgun, things went pretty well. If you have any questions or comments about this video, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, stop by my website, hrfunk.com. Check out the news and information page, see all the latest things going on with me and the channel, and go by the products page because a lot of the products that I reviewed have links on that page, and there's information beneath some of those links that'll save you some money if you decide to make a purchase. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.